Okay, we have a quorum, so I'll call the meeting to order at 7:37. Apologize for the delay, but tonight's a lot of meetings and sports awards, banquets, and birthday parties and concerts. Anyway, we're all here. Are there any additions or corrections to the agenda at all? We got them? Okay, great, thanks. Members of the public, are you here for a specific piece or something you want to get off your chests now?
I guess I was thinking that we were going to begin the discussion of how to manage the budget.
We are. We're going to do that down under old business. We'll probably get there fairly quickly, but I guess if that's what you're here for, we'll get to you in a little bit.
Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody have any correspondence? No one writes to us anymore. Okay. Under new business, we have been requested to spend $82,000 of the capital reserve fund to make ventilation upgrades, and you had asked to put that on the agenda.
Yep.
I assume that's based on the buildings and grounds committee meeting that was on the 8th.
Yep.
Okay.
And there's notes that are in the packets I gave you just now from that, and which include the minutes, and I think, so I don't know if you want to,
Okay.
you probably want to hear from that before,
Yeah, I was going to say,
before you vote to do that?
if we take that use of capital funds item and put it down underneath the building and grounds, that'd probably be good. And then we also have from Lori a tax anticipation note. We generally sign one of these every year just to cover any shortfall in the cash flow before taxes come in. This is the same amount it always is, right? Bill?
It's dependent on, it's the same range, it's not the exact amount.
Okay, but it's not a drastic
No.
up or down? Okay, so we have a tax anticipation note to People's United Bank by Leland and Gray. It has to be signed by all the board of directors. It's for $1,275,000, and the interest rate is 1.75 per annum. Anybody have any questions for Bill? Otherwise, we just need a motion to approve it, and then we'll have to sign it. 1.75. Questions, anyone? All right, so we need a motion to approve and sign it, or approve it, I guess, and then we all sign it.
Correct.
Okay.
I'll make a motion that we approve the
Tax anticipation.
tax anticipation note.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the tax anticipation note. Any further discussion on this? All right, all in
Annual
favor? Yeah, it's a standard annual thing. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right, the ayes have it. I'll send this around if every board member could sign it, that would be great. Okay, administrative reports. Dominic, I saw yours somewhere.
Yep. Before Dominic starts his report, just say that this would have been the last meeting for Chloe as a student rep as she is graduating. And we'll be looking to replace her. Dominic is stuck with us for another year. So we're happy to have him back next year, but this would have been Chloe's final meeting if she was here. She's not.
Well, we would have wished her well and much success. I guess I'll get to see her at graduation.
We will.
So first, the baseball and softball season went well. In baseball, they finished with their season with a record of 6-10-0. That's 11th in Division III, and they lost in the first round of playoffs. The girls, they finished with a record of 13-3-0. That's second in Division III, and they were runner-up in the Division III state finals. Next, we had field day on June 1st. We all went outside, played lots of different games, and the last half we had a kickball tournament where we also played the faculty in the kickball tournament. Next, the student council retreat. We talked about field day and organizing it. Then we talked about organizing student council, the process of election, process of communication with our constituents, and the rules of membership. Lastly, we made motions and voted to what we will be changing in the student council next year. Next, there was a senior versus faculty basketball game. The faculty won with a score of 31-30, and Mr. Tebow scored the game-winning point. The seniors think in a rematch that they would totally win, but the faculty agreed with Marty in saying the better ballers won. But it was also a great community event, and the faculty look forward to doing it again, and the juniors look forward to winning next year.
What are you, a junior or something though?
Yeah.
Okay, I see.
There was an art show and concert. The art show showcased amazing pieces from student artists, and there was the high school band, chorus, jazz, and the middle school band played. And lastly, Dracula went on, I don't have the date, but it was way different than any other play they've had. Instead of bleachers and stuff, they had tables set up, and the play was throughout the gym. You know, around your table or on the other side. And it was quite dramatic, but also funny at parts. And it was pretty captivating. That's all I got.
Thank you. Sounds like the year's winding down successfully. Anybody have any questions for Dominic? Are there elections or possible candidates? To get another student board member, same process as before, submit a letter to the board chair, principal, expressing interest, and then the board will decide?
Yeah, as soon as I get one, I'll let you know.
Okay.
We have some feelers out, encourage some participation.
Okay. All right, you're up next, Bob.
All right, so the packet that I handed out has my report on it. Just a couple of quick things, and we'll have the Buildings and Grounds Committee report out separately, but the Dutton Gym radon mitigation work is complete, and very happy to report that that level is down to 0.1, which, if you recall, the gentleman who were here from the mitigation firm said that even the outside air can have readings of 0.1, 0.2, 0.3.
He said he could get a 0.1 on the common.
Yeah, so that Dutton is considered resolved, and the committee will talk more about what's happening in the rest of the building, but that's where we're at. Student of the Month for April, which is the final Elks Student of the Month, is Justin Crosby of Townsend. All the 6 of the Student of the Month winners were honored at the banquet at the Elks Lodge last week. Mr. Whitman was honored at dedication of the yearbook on the 5th. And then he was honored again by the Vermont Special Educators Association, Golden Apple Awards, an annual award given to one person in the state of Vermont for their contributions to students with disabilities. And it often, as you might imagine, goes to a special educator. And occasionally it might go to a regular educator. So having that happen and have it be one of ours is a pretty big deal. And we had a big ceremony for him, and gonna get some good press out there, even though he hates that. So that was kind of cool. So graduation is this weekend. Last night, Friday night, graduation Saturday morning. Weather is looking a little shaky right now, but I don't have to make a decision until very late. So I will wait to do that. They don't normally give you guys information about who is leaving and who's coming, but this one I want to mention because this was something that was discussed at the community meeting we had in December when we were talking about budget cuts. But Nika Oakes, who's the co-op coordinator, has resigned to take a school counseling position in Hinsdale. So I've been sort of brainstorming a little bit with Mel, with Bill, to consider how to ensure that the program and that the opportunities for kids still continues, while potentially finding some way to have some savings along the way as well. So I wanted you guys to know that's something that we're thinking about, talking about. The intent is 100% to ensure that program exists for kids. It might look a little different on the backside, but we're committed to making sure that happens. It's a fairly unique thing, and we want to continue to have it. But we will continue to think about how to do that in a way that might be a little bit more affordable, and maybe offer some other stuff simultaneously. So just wanted to give you guys the heads up on that. If you hear a little bit about that, that's what the thinking is right now. I wrote down one possibility that we've been talking about is to create a position called the Multiple Pathways Coordinator, which would oversee work-based learning personal learning plans, dual enrollment, online learning, alternative grad plans, independent studies, and advisories. So sort of one person sort of case manages a bunch of different things that operate under the flexible pathways legislation. To kind of coordinate, have one person kind of doing the contact for all that stuff. So, because it's a case management type position, it may not require it to be a teaching position or a teacher, but we're still toying around with what a job description could look like and going from there. So I don't know if there's questions about that in particular. I know that it was, there were a lot of students who came in that December meeting and spoke about the co-op program and saving it, and it never was on the block. You guys had just looked for that number to see what it would get us and how to get there. But because it was kind of a politically charged meeting and discussion, I want to make sure you guys were in the loop that was having potential change down the pike there as well.
How many students participate in the various co-op program offerings?
Yeah, so next year, we have, I think, 24 students signed up to do co-op. And they're typically juniors and seniors. You might get a stray sophomore in occasionally, but typically it's juniors and seniors. And so that works out to about 12 each semester. That's what we currently have on the slate. So, on a related note, I did meet with Alex Beck and Brattleboro Economic Development Office.
Yes.
BDCC. We work with him on there you go, Fast Tracks to Success program, which is a program that works with the other schools in Windham County except us, and offering curriculum on career development and career planning and thinking about how kids can choose careers. So that's something that would be new that we would incorporate into this as well. So I just want to throw that out there as well. That's connected with the counseling department and just thinking about kids thinking about what they're going to do after high school. So this next item I'm pretty excited about. We looked for a while to find our second instructional coach. You may recall that Johanna Laskuski-Doak was hired internally as one of our coaches, and we struggled to find a second coach who we felt really kind of fit what we needed. I believe we have found that person in one by the name of Pam Bernardo. Pam is retiring as a middle school principal after 20 years in Pennsylvania, moving to retire to Wardsboro. So she kind of fell into our laps as an applicant later on. She's a former middle school principal of the year in Pennsylvania. And so we are thrilled to be getting her on board as one of our instructional coaches. So, expecting big things. 4 of our students are going to be attending the Governor's Institute this summer. And I mentioned this, we have kids that do things all the time, but this is a program that requires that we put out a few bucks. And it's a per student cost that we have to contribute to. But we're capped at $700, and so the 4 students definitely bring us to the cap of $700. It's not a lot of money, but I want to make sure that when we talk about budget season, all the little things that you aren't really aware of and how they sneak up. This is a really cool program, and hopefully you guys know a lot about it. If you don't, maybe we can have some of these students come in the fall and talk about what their experience was. And I think that would be a cool way to kind of show you guys a little bit what they do, but it's a pretty amazing program that they have. Yeah, we've had some staff here who've been involved with working there and being connected with there. So, one Phoebe Conley, who's sitting right there. But yeah, so I'm very excited to have 4 of our students go there. A couple of new things, developing a new staff benefit handbook, which applies to the non-union staff only.
Non-support staff.
Non-support staff. That we haven't had one at Leland and Gray, and we've sort of followed the WCSU one, but we're going to actually develop our own so that we can use it to guide how we deal with the non-union staff. We'll have that in place for July 1. And I just want to throw out there, meanwhile, this summer we will be rewriting both the student handbook and the staff handbook as well. So, stuff they didn't get to do last summer because of coming in late and mild medical things. So, that's where we're at. The rest of the packet that you have, well, the committee report is in there, which we'll come back to later, and the rest of the stuff in here is all stuff that you guys had requested, or one person or another had requested at the last meeting, looking for data. And I just want to walk through it a little bit, and then if you have questions, we can answer it. The first page is the one that has sort of the boxes and the charts. This is the after-school co-curricular numbers, and it shows you the percent of students by grade and by gender who participate in athletics, who participate in theater, and participate in the music program. And I think if you look at it, it's interesting that there's a pretty high percentage of kids that do things, but when you compare the numbers this year from last year, there's actually even a slightly uptick in that participation rate, which is a good thing. And we'll continue to hopefully grow those programs. But there was a question about knowing what our numbers were there, if we're going to talk about budgets. The next page, if I'm looking at the right one, is the Dover and Wardsboro page. And this one, the question was asked about where do those kids go, and how many of them do we get, and can we get more of them? So short of driving around in a van and kidnapping students from Dover and Wardsboro, these are the numbers. These are the current students from Dover and Wardsboro who are in grades 7 through 12, with a breakdown of where they go, the real numbers, and then the percent of what percent that makes up. So you can see, for example, in Dover, we only score 5 kids in those 6 grades, which is only 6% of their entire population. Obviously, Brattleboro takes a big chunk, and Burton has a big chunk, and then there's a bunch of other smaller schools that kind of steal 1 or 2. I'm hoping that that's an area where we can see some growth. I know that we used to have higher percentage than this in the past, and I think that's a number that we can continue to build on.
So I was just gonna ask that, is this
Yeah.
number trending down?
I think it has been. I mean, I can't give you an exact number, more just how I recollect it when I was teaching here. Bill might be able to better speak to that.
Yeah, I could just tell you that my first year at Dover, which was 8 years ago, we used to write a check for about 300,000 to Leland and Grey. And when I left, we wrote a check for 30,000.
So keeping track at home, that's a big decrease. But I think that's a big area that we could rebound from, and you know, I know that it
There
clearly
must still
is.
be, these 2 schools though must be suffering the same decline in enrollment we have, so we can get more of smaller pot.
Right, exactly, right, yep. Now, we may not get more numbers, but we would get definitely a higher percentage. Wardsboro, we do pretty well, as you can see. Most of the kids are coming here. And I threw a little bit of note in there that if you take out the kids that didn't attend Wardsboro either, the ones that started in private school, went through entirely, our numbers are actually like 88%. So I don't know how we could do much better than that. I think that's pretty strong. But Dover definitely looks like there's some room for improvement. So, and I did talk to Matt a little bit about that. Matt Martin, who's the principal at Dover, and spoke to him a little bit about coming over and maybe doing some evenings when they have events, and have like a meeting, like a Meet the Leland Gray Principal session that happened maybe half an hour before. People could just come in and see me and talk to me and ask me questions, and hand out some pamphlets. And we did do the open house over there this year, but I think it's going to take a little bit of time for them to kind of get to know and rebuild trust and see a face, and put a name to that face and get comfortable again with it. So.
I guess this is more for you, Bill, because you were familiar with it because you were there at the time, but do we think that there's any impact on the enrollment from Dover to Leland and Gray based on the decisions Dover has made to significantly increase the amount of investment in Burton?
Well, that definitely.
I mean, it was not only going over the allowable tuition, the town voted to go more than the allowable tuition, they're also doing the bus, I think, right?
So 2 things happened in 2012 where the parents were no longer responsible for the spread. So normally you would get the state average, and then state average is 14 and tuition was 18, the town paid the spread. So that eliminated a big barrier. And then the second thing was a bus was connected to Stratton. So parents still have to drive to Stratton to catch that bus. But that bus allowed for both middle school, like at the mountain school, and Stratton Mountain School, and the high school. So those 2 things definitely contributed to the ease of making that decision.
Okay, thank you.
Now, I'm told though that our bus that we turn around and
Goes
South
right.
Newfane run at the Eastover Firehouse actually parks overnight
It
at the
does.
Dover school.
It does.
And we plug in there, and so we have a bus that starts its day at the Dover school. So there's benefits that we already are doing. It won't cost us a nickel more to be able to it's really about winning over some families and talking about programming and you know, where we're going and how they can benefit from that, so.
I have a very anecdotal thing to share. I was talking to a family who has a graduating 8th grader in a choice town, and they were looking at high schools in the area. And so I was very curious. I said, so what was the criteria? What was the final decision? Ultimately, the choice was between Brattleboro and Burton. And I had to ask, so why? I mean, it was the arts. It was the arts that was motivating them. And so I did a big song and dance about the arts at Leland and Gray, and unfortunately, it was not even on their radar. And these are people who have done lots of homework.
So they weren't aware that we had decent art programs?
Yeah, at least it doesn't seem to compare with the bigger schools.
Yeah, interesting. Well, that's good to know, yeah. So, all right, well, that's the Dover Wardsboro. And then on the next page, the other piece that was asked was the students who live in our 5 towns, where, if they're not here, where are they? So this is a breakdown of there's 18 of them who do not come here. And so 11 of them are homeschooled, which is a pretty big chunk, obviously. 3rd go to private school, and there's 1 that takes advantage of high school choice.
Where are these numbers from?
These are from my registrar.
If you live in
There's
a
a
school
9th grade
district,
female missing there.
That's
Could be.
homeschool, you think, or, no, private,
School choice.
school choice. What grade did you say?
9th choice grade.
9th grade, okay. All right, let me look into that one then. I mean, we may be off the
Yeah.
radar.
Yeah.
So,
But-
you didn't break this down by town either.
I did not, no.
So.
We could.
Well, I mean, you know, if there were, you know, 8 kids coming from one town that were homeschooled, that would be important information. If it's just a broad spread, you know, across the 5 towns, you know, I wouldn't need to know. But I mean, if you know.
It appears to be
Yeah, if
focused in one
if there's
particular
any
area.
big message
Yeah.
from somewhere, I think it'd be
I'll-
important to know that.
I'll dig into that and see what we come up with on that one. Get that back.
And, yeah, I got the numbers too. So I think they might be higher.
Oh, you have some numbers as well?
There's kids that might be missing off this list, so
Okay.
it would be helpful if we knew.
Yeah, okay.
How do you get the numbers for homeschool?
The homeschool numbers, they have to be registered, and so we have documentation from
Where?
the central office that tells
Oh,
us.
so they have to be registered at central office?
Yep.
we get a report.
Yeah, I didn't know if that had changed
Yeah.
or something over the years. Okay.
So,
Thanks.
all right, and then this is the last page. The last page of this is, there was a question about non-teaching staff, professional and support staff. And so that's what this is, just a listing of the people, the FTE, the position, or anything else that's relevant, just so you guys would have that information. It's in the annual report anyways, but it's just good to have it in another place. So that's what that is. And then the other piece, which was asked for, was the online, I think Howie asked for the online offerings. So this double-sided course catalog, if you will, is from VTVLC. And this gives you an idea of which courses are offered and how they're offered. And I would tell you, when you're looking at this and you're wondering which courses are offered, ignore the column that says on demand, because that's an additional cost to us. The ones that are free to us are the ones that are in the fall and spring, because those are traditional seats that we get by having one of our teachers teach an online course and by paying a small fee. The rest of those seats we get 25 seats. The on-demand ones are courses that you have to pay extra for. So that's that. And if there's anything I missed, if there's any requests, we had Bill taking some notes and we had gone through the list of things to try to see if there was stuff that we had missed or not. But if there's anything you feel like we missed, or if there's new information you want other than the homeschool by town part, then shoot me an email, just let me know.
I'm looking at world languages,
Yep.
and French isn't offered. Do you know why? that is?
What's not offered?
French.
Yeah, it's all depend, which is, I think, probably because in most schools in Vermont, they probably have French. And so, if you have French, there's less of a need to get it somewhere else.
So you think that in, just with what you're guessing is, it sounds like you're guessing, that more schools offer French than Spanish?
In Vermont. This is,
Really?
remember, VTVLC is just the Vermont
Yeah, I know.
collateral.
but-
The other piece is too, that it's entirely based on their availability to find a school to partner with who can offer a teacher that can teach it.
Okay.
So that could be an element too, maybe they don't have
Okay.
any. I mean, you'll see the Chinese too on there is coming from Leland and Gray. They didn't
Right.
have Chinese too until we partnered with them last year, and now they do. So whenever they get new schools partnering, they get new offerings, and teachers change over, they go away. I think there's a course on here to, at least, music appreciation, which was a Springfield teacher who does that. It's,
So the reason I mention it is because we've had a decline in students enrolling in French for
Right.
a number of years now, and we've done what we could, I thought, over the years to try to increase that enrollment, but, as our enrollment overall has gone down, we haven't been successful in that, so.
yeah, well, and worse this year because of two departing staff members, we don't have anyone who's licensed to do French at all for next year. So what we've done with the kids who are in French, particularly the ones coming out of the middle school, when they're early on in their stages, we've asked them to consider starting one of the other languages over because they're not that far along. For the ones who are further along in French, we've talked to them about doing some online stuff, and it may not be through here, but we're
Right.
going to continue to try to find what other options are available for them.
Thanks.
So, lengthy report, but.
Thank you.
Good report.
Yes. Lots of.
Oh, I guess I should mention this too. So the last document you have is a draft of our continuous improvement plan. I'm not asking for action on that tonight. We will ask for a vote of approval on this at the July meeting. So I want to give you some time to really look at this and get a chance to kind of see how it's structured. This is a format that the AOE is requiring, so if you don't like it, don't yell at me. This is their format. The principals had worked with Bill through the course of the year to develop what we're describing as the umbrella, which is the WCSU improvement plan. And the schools within each SU have to have things that fall under that umbrella. And so in trying to simplify things as well, and really the meat of this is on the bottom of the second page and the top of the third, is trying to limit the number of goals to stay focused, to stay under the umbrella of what is happening at the SU level, and to give us some really specific things to do in the next year or two. So the first goal, or it says prioritized goals, goal number 1, is align the curriculum with the standards in order to develop graduation proficiencies. And this was what we talked about before with the PBGRs, proficiency-based graduation requirements. So doing that work is really our goal, because that's the work we have to do, and it's work that's meaningful around curriculum for the purpose of increased personalization in accordance with the EQS. And then a couple of areas there, PD in the area of proficiency, adoption, writing of assessments and scales, providing instructional coaches to support this work, develop a suitable master schedule to allow for common planning time for middle school team and high school departments, and our addition of the intervention period, or flex period as we call it, in both the middle school and the high school for next year. And then you can talk about what the next box down describes, like how we would know if these are successful. And we had to do surveys to students, to families, and to the staff to get some baseline data on these things. And these were surveys that were the same surveys that were used in all the schools as a result of the work we did at the leadership level. So increasing the rate of implementation of PLPs, which are the personal learning plans, successful graduation by the new policies, PBGRs, and then increased student achievement as evidenced by local and other common assessment results. And as a side note there, these two things, I know in education we throw a lot of like acronyms and crazy things at you. Just so you can hear this, and we'll talk more about this next year, the SU put together, with the work with Jen McCusick, we'll put together a local common assessment plan, which is required. And part of that includes a K through, or is it 2 through 6 use of Ames Web, which is one of the assessment tools that can be used, and I think Newbrook uses it now. So all the schools, including Leland Gray, will be using that through grade 8. And then the high school will utilize a different one called Star 360 because Ames Web doesn't go up far enough. Both of these will test reading and mathematics, and they'll be done at benchmarks throughout the year to show growth among the students. This is in addition to the summative SBACs that will still happen in the spring. These are really more to inform instruction as you go. So those are the names of the two that we'll be using here, Ames Web and Star 360. I'll fill you more on that in the fall, once we have training and such. So that's goal 1, is really about the PBGR and that curriculum work. Goal number 2 on the next page is about creating a common understanding of instructional pedagogy, which is research-based and literacy-driven to implement best practice with fidelity. One of the things that Jen and I had a lot of good conversations around the idea that whenever you have a collection of professionals who all come from different training backgrounds, who all have gone through trainings at different times, all have a pretty different perspective on what best practice might look like. I think there's commonalities that we could all identify that would be best practice, but when you push people nitty-gritty, those things can really be pretty different. So one of the things that we're going to do this fall is bring in University of Pennsylvania Grad School of Education to do our PD around pedagogy. It's they call it PLN, which is the Penn Literacy Network. Penn as in University of Pennsylvania. And that program is going to sort of bring us together with a common knowledge around instruction and engagement of students, lesson plan structures, and have it all be tied together by a literacy focus. So that's sort of the plan for what we'll be doing with that PD, and that could go on for multiple years. They have different levels of coursework that they do. And that'll be for everybody. In addition, the middle school will have some work specifically in a partnership with the Tarrant Institute, which we think will now be more in year 2, not this coming year, based on a lot of factors around time, where our middle school team will be paired with them to get some pretty high level PD, which can be very expensive, but for very little money for us. We sent some people to some trainings, and they cover the rest of the PD. So trying to find ways to do this in the most efficient way. And again, it has the measurables down below. Proficient using reading strategies, writing to learn, and creating implementing lesson plans, having a common language around instruction, and then a variety of instructional strategies being utilized. Both of these goals are using what we call braided funds, some local money, some Title I, some Title IIA, and some school-wide money that will all be used together to do this. And that's really trying to keep it simple, keep it focused, but that was that's the draft at this point until you guys adopt it, and then we send it on to the agency.
So we'll actually be approving that, or some form of that in the next meeting. So if you have questions between now and then, save them up.
Or to email me in the meantime if you
email,
want
yeah.
me to try to answer them so we can come with
Okay.
a better version if we need to, yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Can I
Sure.
just a real quick question. Does this link, I'm assuming, I should have assumed, this links with EQR, the Equality Review process, so that this will be integrated within?
That is the dominant document.
That's why it came from the AOE?
Yep.
Okay, that's why I just wanted to make sure we were.
Yeah, and there used to be multiple improvement plans and action plans, and there was a Title I action plan, there was a school
Right.
improvement plan, there was all these different things, and this is the state's attempt to put it into one thing, where there's not multiple plans anymore, there's one plan, everyone gets it, it's called continuous improvement, because we all want to continuously improve. Yeah.
So as time goes on, it's gonna be really important for us, I think, to hear back from the administration on this, to see how effective it is. I mean, we should be asking the same
Yep,
thing, but we
absolutely.
need to hear it from you too.
Yep.
To make sure, because this is a new process for the AOE too,
Yep.
and I wanna make sure that it's most effective for our school and our communities, so that we are ensuring our kids get
Right.
what the instruction they
Yeah.
need.
And it's a multi-year
Yeah.
plan as well.
Which is great. Thanks.
You have a question?
Nice question. So the board will be voting on adopting the SIP for the high school in July. Is that what you said?
Yep.
So is there, I know we've been discussing this in our faculty, in our community councils, and you've got emails and responses from faculty members. So is that, you're still the channel to discuss any changes?
From the
or-
faculty, yeah, I would say.
So it's,
Yeah.
as opposed to, so does the board hear those concerns, or when or how does any of that come out?
Well, I mean, I could share with the board what I mean, there wasn't a lot of discussion. We ran this through the teacher leaders group. They basically moved it on to the full staff. And really the only, well, there were two questions or issues that were raised. One was raised by one group of folks that I think Gerald's talking about in a community council team that was asking about whether or not we wanted to have additional goals around social emotional, not training, but social emotional health and well-being that would align with one of the goals that the WCSU has, and then what would be action steps for that. And the other question had to do with the type of instruction around literacy that University of Pennsylvania would deliver, and whether it was whole language instruction or whether it was a different kind of reading instruction. And that was from Bruce Rosso, our literacy expert, and he and I had a meeting and talked a lot about that and tried to suss out what we'd be seeing in that training from them. And I think he left that training, for that discussion, more comfortable than he was when we first heard about it, so he understood what it would entail. My response to Gerald's question was really that I wanted to keep the numbers of goals more limited. That just because it's not in a SIP doesn't mean that we still aren't doing other things. One of the things that we did through this, and I will talk more about this maybe at the July meeting, the design thinking process that we went through to do brainstorming around where the school is going to be in 3 to 5 years. There were a lot of really cool ideas that came out of that, some of which would align with this, some of which that wouldn't necessarily be something that would be included here. So I guess my response was that I wanted to try to keep it narrow as possible to keep us focused on moving in a particular direction, and that the more goals you had in a plan of this nature and the more steps you have, can divert our attention from what we need to be doing as a primary focus. And those might be other things we could add later on, and they're still going to fit under the umbrella of the central office plan. But that I believe that having it narrow was better to start off with. So that's what she's just talking about.
May I follow up?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I guess with the interest, and I represent our community council, faculty council group, and the discussion, and I don't know other council groups, their feeling, but the team of 5 that I'm on, because we noticed that in the SU SIP, that I think it was goal number 4, specifically discussed the social emotional health of the students, and it even talked in there about devoting resources to establish a social worker position for therapeutic interventions for students and their families whose needs are beyond standard counseling. And I guess I want to make sure that it's clear where the needs are, because that certainly would inform us in building a budget for not next year, but the subsequent years, and how that's built in. So if it's not part or mentioned, it is in the SU, but it's not mentioned at all in the Leland and Gray. And I know what you're saying, the interventions, and in our discussion of our group meeting last week, let me see, I think you mentioned something, called it behavioral, something with behavior. I can't remember the exact word that you used. But we were going to be looking at some of that in the fall. But I guess if we're going to be discussing budgets, the impact, and then, all those other areas of concern and priority are right on. But again, the social emotional health and well-being of the students, if they're in any bad situations, where we're learning a lot about trauma and learning. There's just so much out there that if I guess I want to make sure that that's also seen as one of those priorities. It's not on the list. And I feel like kids can't do any of the others if their social emotional well-being is just not healthy. So, and that certainly informs budget.
Yeah, I guess my only response would be there's a lot of things that aren't on here that are essential to our students. And then you just, if you list everything, then it's not prioritized, it's not focused. I guess that's really,
Right.
doesn't mean that there's not, those things aren't valued. And I think the SU was taking a crack at that, more thinking about in a broader sense of the
Yes.
elementary schools and other places where those services aren't already available. So I think it was about expanding services, I think, and not listing services that we already have, I guess. If that makes sense.
Are there other, I'm assuming there are other ways we're tracking those issues and, measuring the impacts?
What do you mean?
I mean, school climate, we have youth risk behavior survey, we do,
Right.
it's not like we're not paying attention to that, this is
Oh,
one.
right,
Well, I mean,
right.
this is one measurement tool, and there's others that we use, and
Right.
maybe at some point, maybe even during our summer retreat or something, we can sort of get a better sense of exactly the broad, nature of all of the assessment and.
Right. And I think,
Tracking.
and part of it too is, I mean, there are gonna be some fairly sweeping changes to how we engender a climate here.
Yeah.
And, student discipline and,
Right.
have done, we did some surveying with students and staff around how we view sort of each other and our interrelationships. And that's data that we're gonna be discussing at the end of the year and those remaining PD days with the staff, which is gonna guide work that Phoebe and I are gonna do over the summer to retool a lot of our protocols around that kind of stuff. So, I mean, there's a lot of work that's gonna be done. I guess my point is there's gonna be a lot of other changes that are gonna be included in changes at Leland Gray that are not represented in the SIP. I just don't feel like we wanna list every single thing in there. But certainly, social emotional well-being is a huge priority. And making sure that kids are in places they're able to learn is, I mean, it's, yeah, it sort of goes without saying in my mind, so.
Okay. Moving right along. Bill?
So I have a printed superintendent's report that is available right there. I also sent it to you all digitally. Just a couple quick highlights. We have received the first draft of the district management group's audit for struggling learners. Our new director of special education, Stephanie Beatty Hancock, and myself did a conference call with district management group about 2 weeks ago, and the superintendent's cabinet met earlier this week to go over the draft report and developed a list of clarifying questions, which I'll be reporting back to the group later next week. And we should have a finalized draft in July, which will inform some summer reflection period to look at how we want to tackle what has been identified as opportunities for us to assist students that are struggling in our schools academically, and what kind of systematic changes and leverage investments that we can make. So we'll be doing that work this summer. We'll be working with the leadership team in August, and we'll be rolling that out to inform all the boards early in the fall about this is what we have learned, this is what our strategic response is going to be, this is what we believe we should be focusing on. They really have identified it's a 1 to 5 year ongoing systematic approach. Two big highlights are increasing the capacity of the system to accept students, as Bob was talking about, in their SIP, making sure that there are times in the day that you can have academic assistance and acceleration for students, as well as making sure that we have targeted professional development to increase the capacity of our regular classroom teachers, not simply our special education teachers. So we'll be digging into that. We'll be reporting on that more in depth in the fall. So we're excited about that investment that the state has allowed us to have. It's normally a $50,000 investment. We only had to do 5, so I appreciate that. Also, the second half of that is the 10 supervisory unions that were studied. We'll be getting together in the fall to look at common challenges that we have and how we're going forth on that. At the same time, those 10 common trends are going to be reported to the legislature to look at what are some policy things that can be done in the next legislative session to support what the common challenges are across the state. So we kind of get our little micro level, and then it's going to be going up to a macro level. It really helps to inform the next 5 years of our work. So I'm feeling very pleased that we got to participate in that. And then the other big thing that's happening for this area is that on June 26th, the new West River Modified Union Education District will be formed here at 7 o'clock.
This very room?
In this very room. I think it's in this, yeah, it's in this very room. And the Secretary of Education has designated Becca Ballant, is it Ballant? Ballant, who is our senator from Windham County, to do the proceedings. So we're very pleased to have Becca do that for us. And immediately after the special meeting, the board will organize and elect the officers, which will be leading the 5 towns into the future. So it's a very exciting time. Last time anything like this happened was 1969.
That was Leland and Gray.
It was Leland and Gray. So it's a very hopeful, exciting time, challenging time, but the time to kind of look to the future. So.
Excellent. Anybody have any questions on anything in Bill's report for him? Thank you, Bill.
You bet.
Okay, so what we've all been waiting for, the budget discussion. We've got a bunch of data provided to us tonight. We have the information from the last meeting about sort of what we need to do. We have some members of the public here, I think, to give us some input on some of the things that they value as we move forward with this. So I think the way that this probably ought to work is we've already asked the questions we wanted on our data, right? I think we can hear what the public has to say. We can decide if we need some more data, and we can start thinking about what we want to see moving forward. Probably in this process, we can talk about what the schedule is like for the rest of for the next few meetings, where by some date certain, July or August, we have given Bill and Bob everything they need to work with to present us a budget, so that we see our first budget sometime in September, say. Is that fair?
Yes. Have a draft.
Have a draft budget in September, look at it then, and by November have a budget that we have, had long and serious discussions about and stand behind and get it going forward. Bill has a suggested timeline. He's handing these out.
Yes, I have
Oh, do you have one already?
Oh, this.
Yeah, he built that.
So,
I had it
yes,
remembered.
Phoebe.
I just have a question. Are there
Sure.
of the handouts, are there, okay, great, that's it. Just wondering if there were handouts for, appropriate for members of the public.
Oh, yeah.
But here is Bill.
I got a timeline too.
Okay. So, that said, you guys are all here for the budget, right? Okay, so no burning statements? All right, so board. Do you have questions on this stuff? Do you want to start having a discussion about where we need to go, what we think? Do you need to digest the data you have? And yeah, yes, Bob.
Well, I was just gonna, at the last meeting when we talked about this number, 700 and whatever it was, 60 $60,000 that it would take to get to the threshold. And I heard sort of competing responses and thoughts about it. One perspective, and I respect both opinions. One perspective, Drew talked about the idea we have to clean this up. We've created this mess. We have to clean this up. We haven't addressed stuff. Get the expression I use, but irresponsible to pass on that problem, that gap to the newly created board. I also heard at the other end of the table, yes, sure, but let's not cut any programming, and we all had a kind of chuckle around that, how that was going to happen. But I started thinking about it more after that meeting, and I think as much as I appreciate where Drew's coming from on that, and what he's trying to do, and trying to take responsibility as a board collectively for the past, it strikes me that that's not a one-year problem. It wasn't created in a year. And I guess I would, when we talk about $760,000, I mentioned like that's 10 teachers, it's a quarter of the staff. It's, obviously we're hoping you're not going to do anything, give me a number that's anywhere near that as an end game, although I understand why you would if you did. I guess I would like you guys to think about if it's a multi-year problem in the creation, maybe a multi-year solution is the way to think about it, rather than just a single-year solution. And to set some targets. I know they'll be challenging as the budgets will merge with other districts to create on the new one, but maybe if we set some targets around how to get there over a period of time, rather than trying to do it in one fell swoop, there might be a more responsible way to kind of address that. And just something I really thought about a lot after that meeting. I just want to put that out to you guys as well. And not, all due respect to the group, of course, but it's a multi-year problem. We should maybe think about a multi-year solution rather than an abrupt solution.
We're already in a multi-year, right?
Well, of course,
We started it
right.
last year, and now we're heading into our second year of recognizing
True.
this.
Yeah.
And I don't think, I'm not gonna speak for Drew, but I'll speak for myself. I don't think anybody expected this to be done in 1 year. I mean, it was pretty clear that this is significant, the
Yeah.
changes, and that's a given, I think.
Yeah.
That it's gonna have to be a multi-year. But doesn't mean we, shouldn't be talking about it over those multiple years, because this board won't be here.
Right.
And so we really should be thinking long-term
Yep.
around it, for sure.
Yeah.
Right, we should certainly try and, pass it off to the new board with, having begun solving the problem, and perhaps even a roadmap of like, okay, we've managed to, control some costs and bring some things down here. In this year, we plan to do this, and then going forward, we see additional savings here that you may be able to realize. I mean, that board's gonna be dealing with more school districts, larger budgets, different abilities, even different contracts. But I think it would be irresponsible of us to say, kick it down the road those
Right.
2 years, because it's easier for them to deal with. I think we have to make hard, real decisions now about starting to begin the process of getting the spending in line
Yeah.
and
No,
controlling the
I hear
costs.
that. Yep, I absolutely hear
So,
that.
but I agree, it's definitely a multi-year deal. I was debating with myself as to whether it was fair to ask you guys at the end of this to say, okay, can you do a budget for this year and for next year too, so that we can make it a 2-year deal? And how in 2 years we get to the place we want. And that, I was debating if that was even fair to ask. So, I was thinking the same thing.
Sure, your pleasure. whatever you want to ask is we'll do what you want to do.
Wow.
I mean, I don't think it's an unreasonable thing to think about. Now, you have to know that projections are going to be not, the further
Right,
down you go,
right.
the looser the projections are, but I think that's a reasonable thing to be asking us to think about, for sure.
Okay.
But isn't a plan, a long-term plan, actually the same thing? I mean, you don't actually have to have all the numbers attached, but once you've got a plan in place, which is what I've been trying to get us to do for a really long time.
Right.
You've got the outline for your budget every year anyway.
True.
And we should never hold ourselves firm to any one thing. I mean, we don't even do that now under our current budget. I mean, there are times when we have to change things in our current budget, move things around. So I think we should be flexible like that, for sure.
Anybody, any other thoughts, people?
I've had a lot of discussions with people about this, and bear with me here. Before we get into the how, I'd like to talk about the why and we talk about having to make hard decisions. We talk about what is our job here as a school board to provide education. It feels that we kind of lose that perspective too often. We go about our business by taking guidelines that are sent to us from Montpelier. Equalized student, these ratios that are very complicated. None of us really understand how they come up with these numbers. And the bottom line is you have these hard numbers that you have to meet. And then we're basically faced with this question, okay, well, how much education can that amount of money buy? And I'm not sure that's the right way that I'd like to go about this. We always talk about, we're here to prepare students for life after high school. Can we start there? And come up, with a high school that offers strong programs. And it'll be expensive, yes. And we'll put a budget that all of us will say, wow, that's really a lot of money. And people will vote on it. And if they don't like it, they'll say no, and we'll come up with something else. But I don't think we should start by tying our hands and complying with arbitrary numbers that we have nothing to do in the makings.
Go ahead.
I'm a little confused about the arbitrary numbers, because the numbers come directly, and the spending comes directly from the local communities. We spend what we choose to spend, and that's how our ed funding system works. We can spend 12,000, which some school districts do, or we can spend 18 or whatever we have now, and we get to choose that, and we do still choose that. And I personally have been fighting very hard against those arbitrary caps that you're suggesting that there are out there. And there have been, and there is the excess spending threshold still, but there've been a lot of other caps over the years proposed. In fact, we just took one out, and I'm grateful for anybody who fought back against that one, the allowable growth cap, which was in Act 46, and that's now gone. So we don't really have caps on our spending except when we bump up against that excess spending threshold, and that's been in place a really long time. We get to choose what we spend, and we've been choosing what we spend here forever, as long as I've been around. That's the way our ed system works.
Mm-hmm. You, sir, could you just identify yourself for
Marshall Blitzman from Williamsville. I guess why I showed up was from my experience at the last meeting I was at, and what I read on the website is, I guess, and I think what I hear and what Bauman's saying, I'd like to amplify it, is that I've been on different boards before. I was in the Newfane Elementary School and co-op board, and the direction for the administration is supposed to come from the board, and the board really needs to do the hard thinking about it. And the words are there, but the feeling is like it's going the opposite direction. I got that sense very much from the last meeting and from what was written on here. So I think what I'm hearing from Bauman is, and obviously numbers are numbers and reality is reality, and you have to cope with that, but I'm just not getting a strong sense like the board's really, coming together, wrestling with the hard issues, and then going to administration. Even though that's asked here, it still feels like they're giving you the direction as opposed to you are giving them direction. And that just seems backwards, and like something's missing with this picture. It's a subtle thing, but as an outsider, maybe it's easier to see. And that was pretty much what I wanted to come here and express, was to talk about that seemingly backwards thing. And I kind of feel like that's what you were maybe saying.
Go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. Go, Bill.
Oh.
I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
Since I'm the creator of this, I will tell you that I in no way intend to tell my bosses what to do. But I do feel it is my duty to make sure that we are transparent with the factual information that we have. And so I appreciate you asking the question because it gives me an opportunity to explain that. And
I don't think, that's not to suggest, I think it's more, and again, I've had very little exposure.
No.
Yeah, but,
This is great.
so I have a little, the outsider perspective, but the sense is that doesn't mean you're not doing your job by doing it. I just feel like it's allowing it feels like a certain kind of passivity
Sure.
that needs to be, like what you're saying, no one can disagree. You have to deal with, difficult choices, but it just seems like it's not like just built into the DNA, like, okay, this is our job, and then passing it on. So that,
No.
that's just, as I said, sort of a outsider perspective. I'm not getting that sense.
No, I very much appreciate
Yeah,
it.
and it seems like that's the work that has to be done. And,
Yeah.
and that's, as the public, what I want to hear. I want to hear about people's values and what they consider important, and then you guys obviously have to translate that, but, yeah.
No, that's great. I mean, I think that was absolutely our intent,
Right.
was to do this now, so it didn't feel rushed. Last year felt very rushed, and we want to have the time to have the engagement, the deep thinking, so that we can go and create something,
Sure.
but we need the direction about what to create. So, no, that's fantastic. Thank you.
So I want to follow up on Marshall, and Marshall, thank you for being here and for saying those things, and Bauman too. Just for anyone who doesn't remember it or who didn't go, we did look at that for all the reasons you just said. It is our job. We do need to set a vision and have goals and our plan. And so a few years ago, and I don't know how many, I know you were there and several others, we did get together. We actually developed a short and long-term plan. In fact, it went out 20 years. We did sit down, we spent a whole day up at the Wyndham Hill Inn working with Durin, and we brought in an outside consultant to help us to come up with those goals. And we never really went the next steps with it, but our board spoke very clearly about what our priorities were and what we wanted to see for our students, not only while they were here, but for what they were going to have for their future after leaving here. And so we spent quite a lot of time on that. And I think that's kind of what is the basis for what you're suggesting that we do. And I applaud that and agree with it, and been trying to get us to actually take the next steps of that. And I hope we will do that at some point. We've talked about it like several times over the last 6 months or so, knowing the challenges that we're going to be facing. We really need to be very clear about what our goals are and what our hopes and wishes are for our students and our communities.
You
So
actually have that.
we do have that document, and I was gonna go look for it, then I thought I'll spend more time looking for it than I will talking. So I'll pull it up, and you have it, I'm sure.
I have the
Well, you
document.
probably have it,
Actually,
Bowman.
I suspect the document is
I-
even on the Wyndham Central website.
It
still.
might be. And, it was with Durin. We spent quite a bit of time having that conversation. And what our next steps were to focus on how we're gonna get our action steps in to connect with those. And we never, as a board, some things changed, but we never, as a board, took those next steps to it. So while I'm not suggesting that we can just go and use that document, because it's been a year or two since then, a couple of years at least, since then, but we do have a basis for that, and we should be using that as because it was a long-term goal, to get ourselves moving forward with what that is. So I'm hoping that that's exactly what we do.
Seems like a good starting point.
We've talked about it a lot. It's
Yeah.
important.
That's actually.
I just haven't heard that kind of thing.
Yes, Peter.
Ordinarily, I don't like to participate when I'm taking notes, but as I recall, after a really successful goals deliberation and the production of the document, the board ran into the budget, and there was an audible crash. I seem to remember letters to the editor on the subject. just remembering.
Barbara? No, let me just, sorry, like when I was at the last meeting, there was some, really difficult issues, and I never heard the board say, well, what is our foundational belief, what do we talk about? It just seems like it was a response to the moment as opposed to going to your core values. And I think that just felt like something was really missing, and then it just felt like a continuation from that to this, felt like, and again, I'm not blaming anyone, it just, there were, and it's hard to articulate, but it just felt like that, the direction wasn't coming from the center, which is what is important, even more important when times are hard.
Well, I'm sort of stuck in between what Emily was saying, what Bauman was saying about arbitrary numbers, because I do feel like many of us feel that it's arbitrary. And so if there's this number, the $700,000 number, that's a number. Well, how do you get to that number? If it's not do you see what I'm trying to say? If it's
That number came, I think, if I
Yeah, go ahead.
speak to it came from staying out of the excess spending, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
to stay out of the excess spending.
I think
Yes.
that's where.
Okay.
Correct.
So,
And it's a choice. With this year, we didn't stay
right,
under the excess
okay.
threshold, so it's a choice.
But to
Right, so
keep,
we have a choice.
but will we continue to choose to provide a program that can compete with choice schools and make those kind of cuts, I guess, is where I struggle. I hear kids talking about the girls going to Bernberg next year and how beautiful the grounds are and how nice it is and the library, blah, blah, blah. And it's all true. But, I mean, I don't know. This room in particular is pretty shabby. I love this room, but you want people to walk in and go, wow, what a beautiful place, or what an amazing workspace. But are we willing to commit to something like that, to promote the school, and it's kind of a double-edged sword, to make the place beautiful, compete with some of the area private schools with the physical plant and the offerings. I just don't see how you can do both, and it does feel arbitrary when the excess spending threshold makes it arbitrary in my view.
And that's what I meant when I used the word arbitrary. There are some thresholds that apply to all public schools in the state, and we can choose to go above or below or meet them. That's our choice. But once we go above, there are some penalties that we have to deal with. So
And that comes from above, right?
that comes from
doesn't come
above.
from
We
you.
don't choose that. We can choose to ignore it and pay the extra penalty.
Right.
But that's what I was referring to by arbitrary. These thresholds are decided by very knowledgeable people with the best of intentions, but trying to start by coming up with a budget that addresses those thresholds and then working backwards, to me, doesn't seem like the proper way of proceeding.
Sure. So what happens over time is programs get implemented. They may be successful, they may be beneficial, they may not. They may be outdated. And until we take a hard look at the budget, we're not gonna take a hard look at the programs. I think, and what I was asking for at the last meeting was the administration take a hard look at the programs to make our students and our programs more efficient. Just because we did it that way for an extra $750,000 doesn't mean we can't do it a different way, come up with better programs for our students for $350,000. And for many, many years, we just keep adding on, but not reviewing what works and what doesn't work, what this board is actually doing. And the information that we asked for was the start of looking at these programs. how many students are participating in what programs, so that we can take a hard look at how we spend the money. Because maybe we're spending $250,000 on a program that's only benefiting one student, when we could be spending that same $250,000 on a program that'll benefit 70 students. But we haven't taken a look at that, because every time we put a program up to discuss it, we instantly go, whoa, 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 we're not willing to look at that. We're instantly throwing up barriers to the administration to become creative with the way that they run these programs. And that's what I'm saying. This board needs to take a hard look at our programs so that we can provide the best opportunities for our kids at the most reasonable price. Just because we've had this program doesn't mean we should keep having this program. Just because we've always done it this way doesn't mean we need to keep doing it this way. And as long as we're going to keep going, can't touch that program, can't discuss that program, we can't take into consideration the fact that we could use this money to better serve students, then this school will fail. We're already super expensive. We're already looking at numbers well over the spending threshold. We're already taxing our constituents to the point where they can't afford their property taxes. We can't just keep adding year after year. We have to look at it. We have to look at every single program and decide, does it make sense? I think we have to ask the administration to look for efficiencies, look at rearranging the programs, look at taking the scheduling, taking the staffing, and coming up with a model that makes sense for Leland and Gray in 2017. Not necessarily what made sense for Leland and Gray in 2002. That's what we have. We have an old clunky machine. We need a modern one. That's what we need to ask the administration to do.
Phoebe, I saw you first.
I just have a question, and it's not specific about any of this, but is there any data or information about how many schools in the state are over the threshold? And okay, I'm just curious how many other schools struggle.
It's been in place a long time, the
Yeah.
excess spending threshold's been in place a long time, I can't remember how long, but normally there's just a handful, I think, of schools that go over the excess spending. We've been looking at that number every single year. I mean, I remember with Frank, when Frank was here, we were looking at the excess spending threshold and saying we wanted to stay under there. That has been something we have given direction to the administration many, many times over the years to say, we want a budget that meets the needs of our students and stays under the excess spending threshold. And we've often been $1 under.
I just wasn't sure if, like 70% of schools in the state are facing this,
I don't
but
know
it
what
sounds
is this year,
very,
but
very
it's
few.
easy.
Okay, just a
It might have gone up this year, right?
I have a similar question, same thing, trying to find out what other percent of school boards have to raise the budget and what percent do they have to raise it to meet the needs. And personally, this is only my third meeting, so I know a lot of you guys don't know me at all. But I was on the Act 46 study committee in Jamaica, which is one of the reasons why I accepted the Leland and Gray school board position. As most people, I really don't have time to be here, but it's very important. And I've been having a lot of conversations as well with lots of families who are in the same boat, who are looking whether or not this school is meeting their children's needs, whether or not they're moving. Obviously, we live in Jamaica and have a lot of students going in multiple directions all the time. Even myself have thought about what is the future plan for myself and my children, and what school better meets those needs. And I think the reason why a lot of us are here is a fair amount of us don't want to send our students to Burton. A fair amount of us don't want to send our students to Brattleboro. We enjoy the tight-knit community that Leland and Gray provides. We enjoy the eclectic staff and the community sense of community that really is here and just empowers the individuality of the students. And I'm very concerned about this huge number that we have to tackle and swallow. And I do budgets at work, so it's not like I'm not familiar with it. However, I do think that it's a fine, delicate balance of cutting and keeping our school viable for the future, as well as enabling our students to be able to grow and meet their full potential. And it's, as Drew said, that's something that I actually learned in one of my farming classes, is sometimes you have to address a plan that you've done and see whether or not it's worked. And sometimes you gotta scrap it and it's not working and start over. But there's also some things where maybe the numbers don't help, don't ring true, because one student may be getting that huge benefit. I'm not saying maybe $250,000 worth to do for one student, but anyway, it's very concerning to me to also put numbers with each of the programs as well, because obviously we want to make sure that we're viable so we can stay here for all of our towns and communities. And I feel the financial impact on all of our other towns who can't pay their bills, and I get that, I really do. But I am definitely concerned about the viability, and I don't want to just slash either. So I'm very much committed. I know you haven't probably heard from me in the past, but hopefully that helps anybody get a sense of where I'm coming from.
Barbara, you were next.
Well, I understand the population is aging, and but how are we going to attract young families here if we don't have Leland and Gray at its best? And one of the things about the arts you mentioned, when I came here, we had 2 full-time art teachers. Now we have 1. So that has cut our art program in half.
How many students did we have when you first came here?
When I first came here, probably 100 more than you have now.
So we only had like 3 something?
No, 400, maybe 425, maybe.
Okay, so that's like 150 more than we had now.
Well, the number you're thinking of as a base is the 5 towns, not the total number with tuition kids, is what you're looking at.
Oh, okay.
When you include the tuition kids, it was about, I think the peak was
400.
probably 440 or
Yeah,
so,
440.
450,
Yeah, it was like-
440.
Okay.
And then,
And now we have like 3 full.
well, and part of that is because of school choice. And the whole premise of school choice is that you get better, or parents choose another place to send their kids. Well, we're not on an equal playing ground. So how are we supposed to compete? And how are you going to attract young families? A lot of kids leave here and then they come back. I bet they'd like to bring their kids here to Leland and Gray. But if the school is, I don't know what the answer is, but I'm frustrated. And if the school keeps being diminished, it's not going to help. And we have fewer students, and we have 1 art teacher. So now maybe we are off the art radar, where we used to be known for the arts, the fine arts. So I don't know how. My dearest friends moved out of the district so they would send their kids didn't have to go here, and I can't ask them why because I get too upset. But they and their group of friends have made that decision to move to Dorset or Putney or wherever they have to go so their kids don't go here. What is that? That is not going to be helped by, and I hear you, Drew. I'm not sure what you're talking about, but I know that a couple years ago we were going to offer French. That was a deal breaker for a group of parents. And that's money. So it's a really tough situation that you're in. We are in. But what do? Just keep, I think we are on the path of turning things upside down with the PGRs, right? Could you tell me what
PBG.
which I think, sometimes when parents hear about this, they say, what? They're not doing it in the private school, so it's just a little mind-boggling, that's all.
Yeah, I wanted to respond to both those. One was, Drew, well said, I think that's a good point, but I think what I'm still hearing is somehow you kind of abdicating to the teachers as opposed to saying, okay, efficiency is really important to me, and then the board coming together and deciding, is efficiency a core value, which is reasonable one to have, and then having that as part of what you're transmitting to them, as opposed to just saying, hey guys, tell me what's working and not working. But so just as I remember who said it is a delicate balance, she said, and that's what. So I don't think I can't imagine anyone wants to see one student costing $250,000. I don't imagine that's happening, but I think that's there's a subtle thing, and then the other thing I would address what Barb was saying is you are in tough choices, and it seems like I know I have a strong business perspective that you need to focus on, again, that core and what's going to be most important. I would suggest making it a place, because I think we're at a deficit for having a beautiful facility for whatever, we're dealt with it, but what we can do.
Maybe.
Well, it's not like that's not going to be you deal with the hand you're dealt, and I think making a really emotionally, supportive, happy place. So someone might come in the library and I'd say it's not beautiful, but wow, what a great vibe in there. Like I go in there, and this feels like a loving place. And my daughter, I had two daughters who went here. One went to Compass School, which didn't have much of a facility, but it felt really comfortable with people being who they are. So I would put that forward as something for the board to look at, because that's something you can create without needing a deep pockets for it. But it takes it, and keeping efficiency absolutely in mind, for sure.
You were on the list.
I'm on the list, but
I think you're next. You're the end of the list right now.
So, so for a long time, I've been trying to focus us on the future, because we've known for a really long time what the future was looking like. And so I am 100% in agreement with what you're saying about doing the planning and thinking it out. At the same time, I just want to say cutting money out of the budget doesn't necessarily mean reducing our programs. It may mean reducing our programs, may mean improving our programs in other areas. It might mean taking a new focus, looking at things differently. We need, at this point in time, because of the demographics, we need to reinvent ourselves. We know that. We have to face the reality that things are not like they were when we had 440 kids here, and they never will be in our time as we're sitting here. I mean, they won't. They're not coming back to that. And education has changed during those years as well. We need to be thinking about this in a completely different way. But at the same time, I just want to mention the broader perspective of all this. And if we focus only inward on ourselves, we will get burned and have been burned by what's happening statewide and even nationally around public education. And there is less value put on public education today than there used to be, certainly less than when I first started on school boards 20 some odd years ago. And that worries me a lot. I mean, it deeply worries me where we're headed with public education. And I will just say right now, we're in a bit of a battle at the state. And I'll just speak from my role on the Ed Committee and in the legislature, that we have a governor right now who vetoed a budget over issues around ed spending, honestly. That's really where he's coming from on this. And his hope was to save $26 million and reinvest 2/3 of that in early education and higher education. And the message we keep hearing over and over again is we're spending too much. We're spending too much at the K-12 level. We've been told that over and over again. It was in the budgets, the governor's speech. You know, we've heard this, his budget address. We've heard this over and over again. And while there is some push now to take that $26 million and lower property taxes, none of that really matters beyond the fact that there is this new, strong push to reduce spending at a K-12 level. Schools all around the state of Vermont, like Leland and Gray, are facing exactly what we're facing, and some of them are closing. They are closing, and I really am worried about that because we sit in an area that is very rural and far enough away from other schools where it's going to be a challenge. Maybe kids who live on the south side of Newfane won't feel that impacted if they have to go to Brattleboro, but let me tell you, the kids up on the top of Windham Hill or in Jamaica or in Townsend are going to feel it if we close this school. And I want to do everything we can to make sure we keep this school open. But if we keep it open, we have to be able to offer a really strong education for our kids, for all the reasons that everybody in this room has said tonight. And I don't think any of us disagree with that. So again, I will just say we need to really focus on what our goals are, what do we feel like we need, be very realistic about the demographics that we're facing, and get to work reinventing ourselves, because I think that's really what it's going to take. It's going to take a lot of different ways of looking at it.
Yes, Bob?
What do you, I mean, I'm curious what these guys want to know too, but what do you guys want to know that you feel like you don't? About programs, about what's in the budget? I mean, do some of you are maybe more versed with it, others, like, what can we do on our end to make sure that you fully understand everything you need to understand? It's kind of like, you know, I know it's hard to know what we don't know, but I mean, it's kind of hard from our seat to know what we should be spending our time either researching to give you information on, or presenting to you, or where to start on some of those things. And what, so if people have folks, if you have ideas of what you want to know from us, how can we help you reach those, you know, those core values that Marshall's talking about? Tell us. I mean, we'll do what we can do to help get you information.
I think as far as giving us information and data, you guys are doing a great job. You've every time we've asked for something, you've been, you know, very forthcoming and given us good numbers. I think it's almost a philosophical question. I mean, how do you define the success of a program? I take your point, Drew. You're absolutely right, and I'm all for efficiency, and we don't have to stick with something that worked 15 years ago because it worked 15 years ago. But I mean, I don't want to take your extreme example of one student, $250,000, but I mean, is the measure of success of a program the number of students who are in the program? There are some programs that have very few students, and those students have gone and done very well for themselves after high school, college or otherwise. And those programs have a lot to do with their success. And these were, yeah.
The hard part is it's hard to differentiate out, because you're talking about multiple variables in that case, because that kid is in this program with 3 kids, but he's also in this program with 50 kids, and also in this other third program, and he's on a sports team, and he's in the drama, and you know what I mean? It's hard to, how you determine the success of the kid, because you can track, you know, post-secondary success, and so you can track all that stuff, but how do you know what's causing it? That's the challenge, is that, you know, they write good term papers because our English teachers are really strong, or, do you know what I mean? Like, how do you, that's the hard part. Right, so you're right, defining what that looks like, what is success, is maybe a good place to start. I know the staff, one of the things that we're gonna be doing when we talk about PBGRs, I'm gonna keep saying that, Barbara, so she gets it, PBGRs, yeah, proficiency-based graduation requirements. So the idea, just a quick synopsis, is no more Carnegie units and seat time, but it's based on demonstrating proficiency in these areas identified in the state. Part of looking at those and part of developing the policy around what that looks like, what proficiency looks like, and which areas you have to be proficient in, and how you're going to measure those. Those are all decisions that are going to be made at the teacher level, and then we'll share it with you guys to take it, crunch it, and make it into a policy at some point. But that conversation starts with, what do we want our students to know and be able to do when they leave? And then it moves down the chain from there. And we do that in every disciplinary area, and we do it sort of across the board with what we call transferable skills, soft skills. What do we want them to be able to do? We want them to be able to collaborate, be creative, and so on and so forth, problem solve. But they gotta know a certain amount of history, they gotta know a certain amount of English literature, they gotta know, you know, some science, you know, and what those things are. I mean, I think if the board, maybe this goes back to the document that you guys were talking about that I haven't seen, but maybe if there is something in there that talks about what it is you want a graduate to be, that information would be huge for us. Then I can share that with the staff when we begin that work, because they're gonna have their ideas as well. But I mean, that's not gonna start until the fall. So it's, you know, as far as this timeline goes, but that's why it's a multi-year process, right? But I think those are the kinds of questions we ought to be talking about, is what do we want our kids to know and be able to do? And have that defined. Maybe French isn't a priority of what we want our kids to know and be able to do, but being able to speak a language is. And then, so how do we differentiate in a small school, how many languages are feasible to offer? Is it the French itself, or is it the idea of learning a language and interacting with a foreign culture? You know, what are we really trying to get at there? Because I know that comes up, and bigger schools have more languages because they have more kids in programs. But some schools have one language that they take starting in kindergarten, they take it all the way through, and they're pretty proficient at that language by the time they graduate. It's not about the variety, it's about the depth. So lots of those kinds of questions, I think, are ones that, the kinds of things we should be talking about. And I can give you numbers, I can tell you how much it costs us per soccer player to run a soccer program, and I can tell you how much it costs per kid to have Journey East, I can tell you how much it costs per kid to be in Spanish. And I can give you those numbers by dividing and taking averages and taking salaries and, you know, the whole thing, if that's what you want. I mean, I don't know if that's what you want, but I mean, so you can get to a cost, but that doesn't necessarily tell you the quality of the program. It doesn't, and it's only one variable in the kid's success, so it's kind of hard to, that's the challenge of what you're talking about. But I get it, I mean, it's a tough one.
I would see, I know I have the Wyndham Hill document. I can find it
I
and
do
get it
too.
to the board members. And I would say that, you know, we should, I'll get it to you too. And, you know, maybe that's a good starting place for, you know, July to talk about that, review that, go through some of those priorities, and then we can start to use that to give you guys directions. Like, these are the things that we value. You know, we do have to somehow monetize this at some point and say, yeah, these are the things we value, but we know we can't spend endlessly on this because that just doesn't work. So, you know, we also have to be fiscally responsible. You know, for every taxpayer conversation you've had where somebody says, it's really important, spend the money, educate those kids, I guarantee you I've had the one that says, I can't pay my damn taxes. You need to stop spending money like drunken sailors at that school. And that's a quote from a Townsend resident, the drunken sailor part. So, I mean, it's all out there. It runs the gamut in our district. And we have, you know, there are certainly taxpayers who are very, who really want, you know, I don't want to say don't care, but the monetary issue of this is the most important issue to them. And we, unfortunately, have to then balance the needs of the kids, the education, everything with that whole monetary input. You know, so again, I would suggest that we take a look at that old document and revisit those priorities and start to have the discussion next month about, you know, what we do value, and then, you know, when we look at those values, obviously at some point we're going to have to start discussing the cuts, and then it's like, okay, even though we do value this, you know, somehow we're going to have to start looking at what impacts the fewest kids. I mean, because we can't start taking things out of the budget and reducing the spending without some impact. You've been very honest about that. You know, this number will impact things. But if we say over the next 2 or 3 years, you know, over the next 2 years, move this number down. These are the things that we think are very important here. And you tell us how you get us to that by reinventing and by using the money, by using less money more creatively to educate the kids.
Well, like I talked about with the multiple pathways position to replace a co-op teacher.
That makes great sense.
I mean, are the kids going to get the exact same experience? Maybe not, but they're going to get a very similar experience, and we're going to get a bigger bang for the buck in that regard. So as long as if that's the kind of thing that you're talking about, we're always talking about those kinds of things and thinking about how to restructure and reorganize and try to find efficiencies and without taking away from programming.
Those are the kind of creative thinking that I think will save us.
Yeah.
I just wanted to, I really appreciate you bringing both the state and the national trend currently that is pushing towards privatizing education. setting up charter for profit schools. And as a public school, I mean, we have a battle to fight here.
Yes.
We absolutely do.
And whatever the outcome, we have to go down fighting.
You're right.
Mhm.
Thank you, Bob. It's important.
Oh, Gerald.
So in the PowerPoint or the whatever
Yes.
presentation you presented on the school website, so there's those 4 bulleted questions at the end. And so I presume everybody's had the time to think about those, or how would you answer those questions? Curious.
I think those questions are gonna get answered as we go forward. You know, obviously, we don't have the target yet. We're talking about getting to that target over a number of you know, a multi-year deal. As for the rest of it, you know, I'm not sure the golden cows, I think, will reveal themselves, you know, that kind of a thing, will reveal themselves in the values conversation.
Yeah, and what do you mean by golden cows?
The things
Be
that,
examples.
Yes, please.
examples?
Yes.
It's there,
Well,
so.
yeah, I mean, I asked the question, and the question was mine. And it was really because like in the December,
No, but I know what it
in the
means.
December meeting with the conversation, we had all these things that were on the blocks, so to speak, and people spoke to certain things very eloquently, and the board voted to put things back in. Although not everything, there were some reductions made, and so the question was like, are there things that were, you know, shouldn't be considered, sort of what we were talking about earlier, the other things that we shouldn't be even discussing, that they're just like, these are things that are sacrosanct to Leland and Gray, and we shouldn't consider even discussing them, and if they are, like, what are they? You know, if there's not, and we're just really talking about how, and everything's sort of up for discussion, then that's something that we need to know. In order to develop a budget, you need to know that. You need to know what are the things you can talk about, what are the things you can't talk about, you know? So yeah, that's what that was about.
Where it says the degree that the administration invokes then, having autonomy to develop the budget, they request that. So, I guess that administration being you, Bill, but that is, when you say autonomy, that I presume is also in collaboration and discussion with the staff, the faculty, and what, you know, how we are in the trenches every day, and what we see is really absolutely needed here. So I guess we're the team and asking for that support, I guess, from the board.
That's the way it's always been done, is that it's
Yeah.
been a collaborative process.
Well, yet the question is posed, I just wanted to.
Well, I think you know, it will still be a collaborative process. But at some point, during the development, even the parties who don't get what they want, similar to the board, once the board decides something, then the entire board is unanimous in that and moves forward the agenda, even if it wasn't necessarily something you supported. Again, with the administration and the budget, at some point, whether or not your particular idea was heard or not heard in budget development, the team has to come together, and this is our budget. I'm not entirely happy with it for certain reasons, but it is the budget and we support it. And I think we didn't see that last time. You know, to the very end, every faction, there were a lot of factions, and I don't think there was it ever came together as this is the budget we support. This was the budget that happened. So I think that's what that question was getting at.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, if you remember the December meeting, I think there was the motion that eventually supported the budget being passed. A budget being adopted had some specific things in it that the person motioned to have in it. And so, you know, one interpretation of that might be that, you know, you're basically hand selecting things that you want in the budget versus you adopting a bottom line budget. And that takes away from flexibility around spending. So maybe if you're $10,000 allotted to a certain program that's specifically put into a motion to identify to add back in, that limits autonomy to maybe do that in a different or more creative way. Or maybe there's a different thing that really the administration or the staff believe that 10,000 should really be more used for. But if there's a specific motion in that direction, then that you're limited in that way. That's what the question was
Yeah,
about.
that's what I'm-
Was about seeing where, because that was new to me. And I don't know if it was new to this board or not, but it was certainly new to me as a
That was new to
it
this.
was new to the board, okay, so it was new to all of us.
We've not seen that before.
And just trying to find some clarity on how that process goes forward. Usually boards adopt a bottom line budget, and that level of specificity isn't usually
Micromanagement.
that, yeah, I don't want to use the word micromanage, because I didn't feel micromanaged, but I think that's something that, there's a slippery slope there, for sure. And I think, administrators working with their teams to build a budget want to know, I mean, we want clear direction. I think it's what Marshall talked about earlier, the clear direction as to where to go. Without clear direction, then you run the risk of alienating a lot of different people on the way to only have stuff rolled back. And that's a tough spot to be in as a leader, if there's not clarity. And, I think that's something that a board and an administrative team kind of figures each other out and figures out how that plays out as a relationship evolves. I'm also coming at it from an experience where I was doing this as part of a team with one budget, a bunch of schools in a single town district. So it wasn't it's a different kind of animal. It was really the super putting forth a budget with team people building it, and so there's growth there on my end as well to figure out how to maneuver through that process.
So then over the summers, when you're going to be starting this budget building process, and then it gives, a first draft of the budget sometime after, I guess, the September 12th, it says here, set the meeting, and then, so when would you, it says August 8th, but and I see it in italics and the question mark, the first draft of the budget being looked at, because that's, even in the time frame, if it happens in the September meeting, it's certainly well before your staff is back here working with you to help develop that. I guess we start sort of working on it at that point.
Right. Yeah, I think we would just start earlier than in the past, would be my guess. Yeah, as early as probably as soon as you're back, we can start working on it. Yeah.
That's only a suggested timeline, it's not.
No, and that's when.
And you guys will
When
develop
is
that
an
yourselves.
expected first draft?
Right, and that's why I said,
Yeah.
I see that.
I just wanted to say something, and Gerald help me with this, but it used to be when the decisions were made on the floor before we went to Australian ballot. Now, I'm not saying we're gonna go back there, but there is a history of in this supervisory union where the people coming and meeting and saying, put back 20,000 for this or that, and it would be decided on the floor before we went to Australian ballot. So it's not new, really, but we haven't done it that way.
Right.
So,
And actually, I guess if I could ask this question, because I know when we had one of those meetings in the winter and I sent a letter, and I know you included it in the notes, but I had made the suggestion about having our budget at town meeting time still by Australian ballot, so it still includes people who can't make town meeting, they still have the 9 to 7 time frame to vote, but it also allows for people to then express more, discuss it more. That happened at our town meeting this year, even though the budget had been approved. There was so much discussion about the Act 46 and its impact on the school budget and so forth. And so we would get many more people out voting if we were able to do it. And we're one of the few towns that does not do it that way at town meeting. Many towns do. And I know the reason's been given, but when you see how many people turn out for an Australia ballot in February to vote, very, very few, very low number compared to town meeting numbers. And I think even at our town meeting, we had more people voting at the town meeting than the entire vote altogether. So what about,
Well, this is our last budget. So most of that future stuff doesn't really apply because it'll be the Act 46 group that does the next budget. So at this point, I don't know what doing that research would actually do.
Actually, I don't think we can't.
I'm not sure we
can't
can do
actually
it.
change it because we've already set our dates for the following year.
next
for
year,
the-
but
right.
subsequent-
But after
That's
that,
it.
it's the merged board that would make those decisions, and I would expect it will change, and in fact, my guess is it will be town meeting. Is
It
the-
would be.
I mean, I can't
Yeah.
state it, but all the other towns except Leland and Gray have, at their elementary levels do it then. It's a discussion that will happen when the merged board, starts making those decisions, and it's worth the conversation, absolutely.
yeah, so that's with the next.
Yeah, that's the merged board.
Board,
Yeah.
right. So when would that question be posed to then have it discussed, and have it decided by that next board?
It'll be a ways off.
Yeah, that board hasn't even organized yet,
Yeah,
so it'll be a ways.
when is our,
Another year.
Another year,
yeah.
maybe when they're developing their first budget.
I mean,
Participating, it's just the
You've got
numbers.
3 people sitting here listening to you right now who are gonna be on that merged board, and believe me, I think it's an important suggestion. Absolutely.
All right. You done with budget?
Yep.
Till next month? Okay,
One-
sure.
Thanks, sorry.
You are staying till the end of the meeting.
Is, given, obviously you guys give the direction and you're essentially representing the public, has there been mechanisms for people to have public input into the, what people are considering the critical things to focus on? Is there, I know that's a tricky, having been on boards, it's a tricky thing because you never hear from the public in the way you necessarily want, but I wonder, is there some way to, because you guys are somewhat reaching in the dark to know what other people are
We
thinking.
have, there have been newspaper articles written about our budget. There have been, we televise all our meetings.
Not just the
We
budget,
publish
but,
our
I mean,
email.
The part before that, what your core, what you're deciding, what are the it seems like everyone's gonna agree, more or less, I assume, preparing the kids is our mission, but then what are the critical skills to focus on? I think that might have a lot more difference of opinion, and it seems like.
When we developed that document, it was a regular meeting. It was warned, so any public member could show up at any one of those meetings and contribute.
Who did?
I think we did have a couple of people, but, we have not specifically gone out to the public and said, come tell us what matters to you. We did a similar thing during the Act 46 study where we had public come in and talk about what mattered, and schools, what mattered culturally and specifically about that school. And a lot of that translates here, so we've heard, a number of us have heard it as part of that, and I assume those things still hold true because it was less than a year ago. But we have not specifically gone out looking for that input. But those are typically all-day meetings, and they're warned, and it would be, it gets difficult for somebody to take the day off and come and contribute to that. So, no, you get it by email or phone call or,
But I think it's, can I just, I know we don't want to beleaguer this, but I think it's an important question, and Bob, is there an active parent-teacher organization yet going? I mean, we did have a group start up, I know, a few years ago, and then I'm not sure whether they're, because that's one way to reach out. I think it's morphed,
that parent advisory group.
yeah, it's morphed over time,
It just seems
but,
like it's the critical thing.
Right, well, I agree.
It takes pressure off everyone and makes the whole process easier. You guys are giving direction to them, and you got your direction from the public, and then when it comes budget time, the numbers are essentially expressing the will of the people as best you can formulate. It just seems like it ultimately, it's like, ends up being more efficient, even though it sounds squishy. That's basically.
Well, we're gonna be going through a bunch more of this process, and, we'll invite the public in on all of it.
Well, I had suggested us doing a survey a while ago, and they had suggested that we were all elected because we represent our group, but I feel that something like that, maybe it would be nice to do, and like maybe go through the budget line by line, and maybe if we can at some point get at things that we're thinking about cutting, and then maybe posting meetings in different towns and saying, how do you feel about these things that we're thinking about cutting? I think maybe that might be a better time to do something like that. But I personally feel the more opinions and views is better to get one formulated opinion.
I guess you're also well aware that there is a group that's formed called the Leland and Gray CAN, so the Community Action Network. And so it's kind of broad from various towns and so forth, and I know the group is just formed to help for this purpose. And, you know, so try to be more engaged with that and come to the meetings and use that as a vehicle also to.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Hard work.
You don't want to stay for the rest.
I do.
All right, let's move. Let's see if we can move this along then. Act 46 agenda, or Act 46 update, I guess. Quickly, what I know, and I may not even know it all, is Dover apparently has to re-vote
Yes.
because of some sort of extra language they had in their ballot that I guess they shouldn't have.
Correct.
That had to do with school closure. So Dover is re-voting.
Yes.
What's the date on that?
July 11th.
July 11th, okay. As Bill said earlier in his report, the West River MUUSD will organize June 26th here. Senator Ballant will be calling that meeting to order, and we'll figure out who's going to be what in the new scheme. And then I know the Act 46 group board have been meeting sort of as a group of citizens for the last 4 or 5 meetings. We've actually got a consultant who's going to be coming in and leading us through a couple of different meetings that are sort of half of a retreat that do some of the things that we were discussing tonight, only from a new entity perspective, with vision and mission, and as a new district charged with educating K through 12 or pre-K through 12 for this larger chunk of Windham County. What do we see as important, and how do we see this working, and what can we do to best serve that our entire constituency? That'll happen over the summer. That's sort of the broad thing, and then I guess it'll start with the nuts and bolts development of how do things like school choice, which is actually allowed under the articles at the elementary level, work. What goes forward, how do programs change, what are the offerings, what makes sense. So that'll be fun and exciting. Stay tuned. Did I miss anything?
That's good.
No? Okay. Any questions? Okay. There's nothing for policy, right? Okay. Bills and pay orders?
Giving the building and grounds.
Buildings and grounds.
Oh, buildings and grounds. I'm sorry, I skipped right over you. You were around scrawled notes. Excuse me. Do we have a spokesperson for that? Drew, Bob, anybody who's on?
Minutes, there are minutes. They're not approved by the committee, they're just my
Okay.
ramblings, but I don't know if there were several of you guys there.
Well, something comes out of this that you want to
Right.
make a capital fund expenditure.
Because of the time, I can give you the long story short, if you'd like.
Okay.
Under 2 minutes.
Yeah.
The long story short is that we need to be thinking about 2 parallel paths. One, what are we going to do in the short term to solve some immediate problems? And 2, how are we thinking about the building 20, 25 years out? What are the needs, so on and so forth. To answer the first one, we have some work being done. This came through the CX Associates Engineering Study, that while there's a bunch of stuff that need to get replaced, the first thing and the most important thing to replace would be the computer controls for our heating and ventilation system. It's obsolete, there's no parts available to replace and repair. And we're looking at probably between $70,000 and $80,000 to do that work. Now, that is not budgeted. We budget around 30 or so a year for annual projects and things like that, building improvements, but this obviously is beyond that. Roy Garland was present at the meeting. She had told us that we have just over $80,000, about $82,000 and change in our capital fund. So I think, and I won't speak for these guys, but I think that the recommendation from the committee is to ask the board to vote to authorize the spending of money from that capital fund up to $82,000 for the purpose of replacing the computer control system.
You want to speak to that, Drew?
I'll make the motion.
That's all you need to say,
That's all you
right?
need to say. I'll
Okay.
make the motion to authorize using up to $82,000 in capital funds to upgrade the ventilation system.
I'll second it.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to authorize the spending of up to $82,000 from the capital fund to upgrade the ventilation system. Is there any discussion on that? Sounds like it's a pretty pressing matter.
Right, so before you get into the vote, one of the things I'll mention is that there was a friendly discussion around the idea of like how do we manage this immediate concerns, how do we deal with moving forward and thinking about the longer term stuff. You know, we just had this discussion about budget and student needs and what do we want them to have and don't be able to do. While we're thinking about those numbers that we're tossing around and thresholds, arbitrary or notwithstanding, there is, this 82,000, this is the rainy day fund. In the last, I forget how many years, 5 or 6, there has not been a nickel put into that fund through annual budgets, all right? This is money that's been sitting there for a period of time, it's been spent down, whatever, but that's what's left of it. And that's sort of the cushion. So just be aware that when we spend this down to do this work, which is very much needed, like that's it. If we don't start putting some money back into capital fund, we're not gonna be taking care of the 25-year problem.
We won't be able to take care of a critical issue that comes up in the future. We discussed that at this committee meeting, and we knew that we were depleting it down to nothing. And it's that serious that we really felt, and I think all three of us did, we really felt strongly that we needed to do this. We had no choice, really. But once we voted on this, I just want us to say quickly about the long term, because that's a really important thing.
Okay, any further discussion on this? All right, all in favor of authorizing the expenditure of up to $82,000 to address the ventilation system problems, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The ayes have it. All right, let's fix that. And then there's more from you guys as a committee here?
I don't know. Well, I'm just gonna say, I don't wanna get into the details, because it's all right in here, actually. And thank you, Bob, for sending these out, because I think it's really important. But this is serious. We actually have, serious challenges in this building, and significant costs are coming if we are going to be able to maintain this building. There is no question about it. We're talking multi-million, we're talking over $1 million. Who knows how high it could get when we do start looking into the actual numbers. But, so we're talking bond to do the long-term needs that we need to do to keep this building, to bring this building to where it needs to be. And we cannot minimize that. It is a fact. Because while it's critically important that we provide the appropriate education for our kids, we also have to have a building for them to be educated in. And we need to take care of it. And so I just can't say how important it is that we stay on top of this. It's going to be a significant cost, and it will impact taxpayers. No question. Either of you guys want to say anything?
I'll just add, and while that's taking care of what has essentially been a level of neglect in recent years, and some just, stuff that needs to get replaced over time, it still doesn't account for the planning for the future 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years out. And so when we're thinking about the budgets being tight, and I know why there hasn't been money put into the capital fund, this exact reason that you guys talked about, Bob, how we tried to get to the threshold over a period of time, and so things got cut, and in favor of keeping programming for kids, things were cut for capital expenditures. And I'm not judging, I get it, but we'll be fixing the short term with the bond to address that, while, again, neglecting 15, 25 years out, if we don't start putting money in simultaneously while we're still having this budget crisis. That was the nature of the debate, is we need money now to do X, we also need to start thinking about Y, in those time spans out there. So I think that tries to capture that. Two pieces of updated information since that meeting. One, you can see on one of the bullet points here, I was asked to reach out to the state, and the AOE's response was basically, yeah, we don't really do that. That's the health department. If you can't get a response that's suitable, go to the health agency of health commissioner. So I'm going to pursue that, and I have an email that I'm waiting from someone at the Department of Health to help answer that. And the second piece is that there was a structural engineering study that was done a little bit ago. I'm not entirely sure what year. That is in a folder somewhere in this building. And Frank gave me the name of the firm that did it, so if I can't find it, I'm going to contact them to get that. I think that will help answer some questions about the structural piece of the building. I think if I get my hands on it, I will share that back out with the board, and maybe some of you guys that were here at the time remember that.
Yeah, I remember the study, engineering study.
There were some things that identified, so
Before.
that's where we're at.
Okay, thanks. All right. Now policy, nothing.
Nothing.
Right? Bills and pay orders?
We had to change one of the totals on here because we could not find $94.16, but we're gonna pay what we could find for the Staples.
Okay,
So we changed the totals.
okay. So we have 3 general fund warrants in the amount of $155,405.69 and 2 payroll funds totaling $236,467.78 for a grand total of, you didn't change that total.
Oh dear.
So it's the addition of that and that.
Yeah, it's
so-
that and that, so.
So that's
We
the
were
grand
close.
total. It doesn't really, you don't have to do it right now.
Yeah, I'll get you the grand total, but.
You've already stated the two, so.
Right, so the grand total I'll give you in a second, but, and as we can see, it's been moved and seconded, so, it's been reviewed very well. So we just need a motion to approve it.
So moved.
Second? All right, any discussion on that? All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve the bills and pay orders in the amount we'll get in a minute. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. I'll give this to you, Peter. Do we have the May 8th minutes? I don't remember seeing them. They're on the consent agenda, but I don't remember seeing a draft of the May 8th minutes. It may be that you sent them to Meg and Meg didn't get them to the
It may
board.
be that this new system is at fault.
Yeah, let's just take the,
July. We'll do them in July.
we'll do them in July. Let's just pull them off. But I think we need to look at that system, and we can do this not at a meeting. But I think they go to Meg, and Meg didn't get them to the board, and I didn't see them, so I didn't get them to the board.
They go directly to a drive that Meg controls, and she posts them to the SU website under the boards that they refer to, and they are available there as fast as anyone else can possibly see them. That is the first place they're available.
We're used to getting them in emails, and
I know.
we didn't know to go out and look for them, so I don't think anybody's seen them, but
Right
we'll
now,
fix
she
it.
is willing to notify you that they're up.
Okay. Do we have any other things we need to talk about? No? All right, no executive session. You all can see the next meetings will be in July, and the organizational meeting we've talked about, and then WCSU retreat in September.
So,
Motion to adjourn.
I would just confirm that July 11th should just be a regularly scheduled meeting. I had given you a draft of some timelines, and that we just make sure that the Wyndham Hill document gets out prior to that.
I will go find that, maybe not tonight, but
Right.
tomorrow.
That'd be awesome. And go ahead.
All right, now I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Thank you, Joe. Thank you.
This is-